Okay, the stream has started. Everything you say now is going into the pre-show, which people can hear.
Sure. Sure. Thank you.
Okay, let's see who accepts the stream.
Oh, and can you put the stream in the Peace Center Facebook page too, please?
Yes. Okay,
Thanks.
Twitch has accepted the stream.
Good.
YouTube has accepted the stream.
Mm-hmm.
And Facebook has accepted the stream.
Wonderful.
Now, do you want me to put it in on the Peace Center page before you start the show or after?
You could start it now, just so that it's done, so that you know, just one more thing to check off the list.
Okay.
And so I see that box with all of our boxes on it has the 5 on it. So am I going to be able to watch that to watch the time?
Thankfully, yes.
Okay. So just so you all know that towards the end, I'll sort of take back the mic, as it were, to close out the show. So when it's coming close to an hour, you know, I'll sort of ask people for, like, what's your bottom line that you want people to remember, or something like that. And then that'll be a quick go round, and then I'll take back the show and close it out. Okay? So anyway, so I think we're good. Ready to go.
All right.
So.
Okay, they've given me the link, and I can now put it on the Peace Center page.
Wonderful. So, and if you're curious where we are on the time, you see where that little 5 is in that other, I don't know if you can see it. You might not be able to see it.
You should be able to see it.
Yeah. That when it's getting near like 5, 55 or something, I'll be reining back in the show, and then we'll be closing it out to make sure we don't run over. So, yeah.
Okay. Are you ready to start the show?
Everyone ready? Do you have water if you need it? Okay.
We have every audio on everybody?
Oh, turning off. Okay. Oh, you want to do an audio check? So, yeah. Craig?
Just have people count to 3.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Good. Next.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And
1,
finally.
2, 3, 4, 5.
Hey, isn't that beautiful?
Okay, wonderful. And when we're going around, we're going to go Craig, Imam, and Yousef, just so that you know to expect that, right?
Okay. Can I start the timer?
Yes, you can. Oh, and reminding people to turn off your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. And when the timer says on the air, you're on the air.
Thanks. Welcome to Talking Peace with the Western New York Peace Center, being recorded by Think Twice Radio in the home of the future, also the home of our friend and producer, Richard Wicca. Thank you, Richard. And thank you, too, to our friends at WBNY, Buffalo's original alternative radio station, coming out of Buff State. That's 91.3 FM. We thank our friends at Buff State. And when I think about thankfulness, I think about our friends, our Black, Indigenous, and people of color friends who have so much to teach us in terms of how to deal with hardship, and who, in spite of all kinds of injustices and everything, still raise up thankfulness as such an important thing. The Haudenosaunee, that we're here on stolen Haudenosaunee land that's been taken through violence and trickery. And the Haudenosaunee still have the same habit that they always had, where they start their events off with something that is really the Thanksgiving address, that thanking the people who were there, thanking Mother Earth for giving everything that we need, thankfulness to the plants and the animals and all of the different elements of the creation, both here on Mother Earth and as well as Brother Sun, Grandmother Moon, and all the sky world, and then the Creator, of course, and then the love that animates it all. And then when they're done, they say Yahweh, and the people say no. So Yahweh, you can say no. So Yahweh.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I want to say, you know, that it's very much like when people say Ashe, Ashes. So that is what, you know, the people who were brought here, you know, kidnapped and enslaved and brought here. The same thing about the saints and the just, you know, so knowing what's important and being thankful for that. And I'm thankful for our guests today. We have some very special guests on a very difficult topic, or a very difficult or very simple in some ways. So I'd say, you know, the Middle East is on fire. That is obvious that there's just massive death and destruction going on, and the perpetrators, we can say very simply, Israel and the U.S. are just doing all kinds of things that are creating havoc in the region, and the genocidal acts and the war crimes that are going on are just outrageous. So this show is entitled Middle East on Fire, U.S. Israeli regime impunity, and U.S. government complicity. And I'm going to say it is a diabolical partnership that's going on, and it is doing damage the likes of which we have not seen before. That's a trumpet some people use a lot that I want to use in this connection. So anyway, we're very, very blessed to have some wonderful guests for this topic. So I want to introduce first friend of the show and winner of the Western New York Peace Center Stellar Media Award, which is very minor compared to all of his very wonderful work that he's done and well-known. Craig Mokhiber. Welcome, Craig.
Thank you, Vicki. Great to be here.
So, Craig, I just have to mention for people who don't know or haven't read this or don't know that you're an international human rights attorney and expert and former senior official with the UN who quit over the injustices and the failings of the UN system to see to the rights of the Palestinians. So we're grateful for all your work and all your stellar media and your eloquence. So welcome. We also have with us Imam Ismail Ayash. Welcome, Imam.
Thank you. Wa alaikum salam. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you.
Oh, we're so glad to have you here. So as a Palestinian, as a dad, as someone who has people still there that you're concerned with, we're so grateful to have your voice on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy to be with you.
We're so happy to have you here. And also, last but not least, that we have Yousef Jebar. Am I saying it right?
Jabber, yeah.
Jabber. Okay, Jabber. So Yousef, thank you for coming. Yousef, I want to say, you know, I've known Yousef because of you've been very eloquent when I've heard you speaking as well about this situation. And as a Palestinian American and a grassroots organizer, particularly on the topic, we're very grateful to have you here as well.
Yeah, very, very thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
So what we like to do is go around on the values that we think of. So the topic, Middle East on fire, Israel regime impunity, and U.S. government complicity. So on that topic, what are the values that we need to think of? So we're going to go as general in a talking circle. So Craig?
You want me to start?
Yes, I want you to start with the values that you think of as most important in this topic.
Well, I guess the most pressing issue is justice, isn't it, Vicki? Not just because it is an entitlement to the many victims and survivors of genocide in Palestine, the victims of aggression and occupation all around the region of the Middle East, but also because without justice, to recall a word in the title of this show, we are confronted with impunity, and impunity inevitably leads to more violations.
Right.
And it is the fact that, the Israeli regime has been granted absolute impunity for 80 years, underwritten by the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, other powerful actors, not to mention corporations and others. It is that impunity that has led to the downward spiral in the region, that has set the region on fire, and has emboldened Israel to perpetrate gross violations of human rights and international law in front of the whole world, without shame, without hesitation. And so ending that impunity and demanding justice, it seems to me, is more important than ever.
As always, so well put. Absolutely. So justice and ending that impunity, really focusing on justice and making the justice happen. So critical. And Imam?
I don't know how to start, but Middle East on fire is not only now. This is started since 1948, or even before. Unfortunately, the people and the world, they just sitting and watching what's happened to the Palestinian people and others also, without doing nothing when it's come to the benefit of some specific regime. You see the world step back from doing anything that to protect people or to stop the injustice around the world, or especially in Middle East, especially in Palestine, who's really on fire. We say the Middle East on fire, but if we can use Gaza on fire and Palestinian area like the West Bank is really on fire. And you know what? When you invite me to this show, I was asking myself many questions. I tell myself there is many shows, and there is a lot of people, they are talking around the world, and leaders talking, and the presidents of different countries, they are talking, and they condemn everything that's happening, and they are talking about the injustice there. But the reality is nobody do something. Just we are talking and talking and talking. So I tell myself, what's the benefit of we are just gather and talk in the show, or go outside and talk and talk and talk. But until when?
Right. Well, thank you. Thank you for both of those points. So one, that justice and those needs are not new. They're not something that just happened, but it's been happening. The 100 Years War on Palestine is what some people call it. Rashid Khalidi wrote that wonderful book. And also, as you say, action. So we will get to that. Don't you worry, that we will not leave it to only talking. So, and Yousef?
Yeah, I guess what I think of when I hear the title of the show, when I think about, the things that have been mentioned before me, I kind of think about personal responsibility, especially as citizens of the United States, as people occupying stolen land here. What is our responsibility in these topics, in these issues, in the impunity, right? And I think that, it's always been a really good time, but now is as good of a time as any to start thinking really critically about what your place is in these issues. These are not isolated incidences. This is our own government. We all play a role, whether or not you realize it. So for me, I kind of think now is the time to really look critically at the life that you live and at what cost that comes at. And I think that what's happening in the Middle East now is the perfect example of what that is. That is one of the major costs of the comfort that we have here. So for me, a lot of it is just turning inward and realizing that all of us have a part in this. This is not something that doesn't affect us. This is not something that we didn't create, perpetuate, etc. So I think that's the main thing I think about.
So thank you. Personal responsibility is so important. And as you said, there's a certain way in which we are complicit. And I just love that you brought up about our being on stolen land. As I was starting off with the Haudenosaunee, actually on the Seneca, I'm on Seneca land. I don't know. Actually, I think you're on for the Tuscarora. So anyway, different, but we're all here in Western New York right now. And, so there's a lot of colonial issues that come up around Israel and Palestine, and our own lives here and now. The values that I think of, they have to be this. I almost invariably will bring up truth and love, because part of what I think this talking piece is about is bringing up truth. And I think one of the big problems is that people don't know the truth, or they hear it in this either with misinformation or disinformation, and they say, you're wrong. No, that the Palestinians have whole underground cities that are magnificent and getting all the money that's been poured into them. This is what they think. So they say, oh no, you haven't been there. You don't know what it's like. Well, I have been there, but not for a long time. But also, just because they've been there doesn't mean that they know the truth of the matter of what's going on. Also, sometimes people don't want to know the truth, or we only take our information from the sources that give us the truth that we want to hear that may not be true. So that's the first thing. And the other is love, because of the love that if we care about people, if we care about the children, the families, the innocent people who have been in an indoor prison for so many years, who have been now under siege and under bombardment and under starvation and under lack of water and everything. If we love people, we can't just sit by and not act and not do what we need to do about it. So those are the values. And I want to say, I want to quote Cornel West, who says, justice is what love looks like in public. So that justice for people, that's about loving people and caring that people should get a fair shake, that they should get the justice that they deserve. So anyway, so that and doing something about it and the personal responsibility, all those values very beautifully put. So let us talk a little bit more about just what's going on. And I want to say that we're very purposeful in wanting Craig to go first, because Craig, you know so much about what's going on, and you're so well informed and you're so eloquent. So please bring us a little up to speed on where we are today in this situation that keeps changing and also keeps not really changing, however you want to put that.
There are developments every day, but you're right. Those developments all keep pushing us in the same very dark direction. And, we opened talking about impunity of the Israeli regime and what that has led to. We're just coming off the heels of a bombing of Iran by Israel and by the United States. A lot of folks they think this is just conflict between countries, but they don't recognize that, in fact, what the U.S. and Israel did is a crime under international law, indeed a series of crimes, because first, that was an act of aggression. You can't just bomb a country because you don't like its policies or you think it's going to be some threat in the future to you. That's an act of aggression. It's been called the supreme international crime during the Nuremberg tribunals after the Second World War. But they added to that crime with additional crimes. For example, in international humanitarian law, bombing nuclear facilities is unlawful. For obvious reasons. That's not something that you do willy-nilly, and yet they did bomb nuclear facilities in this case, imposing enormous risks, not just on people inside of Iran, but the entire region, potentially. And of course, we know that the massive bombardments perpetrated by Israel in Iran killed many civilians, children and women and men who are civilians as well. So this was a series of tremendous war crimes that only could be perpetrated when you have a sense of impunity that international law is not going to apply to you. And we shouldn't be surprised because, as you said, these things have been developing in this dark direction for a long time now. We know that even as Israel was bombing Iran, it was still perpetrating genocide against the Palestinian people. It was administering an apartheid system in Palestine, as has been affirmed by the International Court of Justice. It has, just a couple of years ago, carried out a transnational terrorism attack using booby-trapped pagers in Lebanon in gross violation of international law as well. Thousands of armed Israeli attacks on Lebanon, on Syria, on Yemen, on Iran. They have been occupying territory in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Syria, and expanding the territory that they occupy in Syria. They've been carrying out extrajudicial executions on foreign territory across the region, just assassinating people. Only a couple of weeks ago, we witnessed them commandeer the humanitarian flotilla ship, the Madeleine,
Right.
which was delivering humanitarian supplies to Gaza, trying to before it was pirated, boarded, and they abducted all humanitarians on board and carried them off to detention inside of Israel. It has continued to carry out countless attacks on the United Nations itself, killing its staff, destroying its facilities. And I think, for those of us living in a country like the U.S., we have to say, the Israeli regime has also been using its proxies in Western countries like here in the US to harass human rights defenders and to corrupt government processes as well. So this is the sound of impunity. This is the message to the world, is that this regime can get away with anything at any time. It can perpetrate any atrocity, violate any international law, and it will be protected from accountability because the United States and other allies, such as the United Kingdom and Germany, will not allow the regime to be held accountable. This is extremely dangerous because we're talking about a government in Israel that has its own stockpiles of conventional, high-tech, nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons. It allows no international inspections of those weapons. It refuses to ratify the Non-Proliferation Treaty that would relate to those weapons. It has a government which is a far-right, deeply racist, fundamentally violent regime, which is unconstrained by any international norms of international law, international diplomacy, even I would say common morality. And then you add to that this element of impunity, this message to Israel that you can do whatever you want into this cocktail. And you have to say that the number one threat to international peace and security and to human rights at this moment in history is the Israeli regime and the complicity of powerful Western states like the US in facilitating that. We've just crossed well over 600 Palestinians killed in aid massacres at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation sites. For people who are following this, this is a perfidious title of a scheme set up by the Israeli government and the US government as a part of the final stage of genocide in Gaza, with private military contractors and Mossad and CIA operatives and mercenaries from the United States posing as humanitarians to draw starving Palestinians out of their tents, many of them living in tents now, to make them stand in a line for hours in the hot sun, only for many of them to actually be cut down by Israeli quadcopters and snipers and tank fire and so on. You do not attempt such an obvious and heinous crime in full public view in the middle of a live stream genocide unless you are convinced that you will not be held accountable for your crimes. And that's where we are now.
It is really horrific, just so alarming and terrible. So, your thoughts, reactions, or things you want to add, Yousef?
So many thoughts, so many reactions, right? Obviously, it's enraging. It's like watching on the individual level of all of these things happening. And for a lot of us, just kind of, I don't know, realizing the lack of power we have to stop it. It's infuriating, right? It's tragic. I can list all of the emotions I feel right now, but I think we all feel them. And for me, the main thing is like, this is why we need to take action. These aren't just headlines that are going to go away. This is the reality of the situation, and it's going to keep unfolding. So for people to kind of continue on, it's like, until when, you know? How bad does it have to get? So.
Yeah. so bad and worse, and just more people dying, more people suffering, more endless suffering, just a horrible, children starving to death, people with no water, just hospitals, universities, all of UN sites, aid, so-called aid missions, as you said, being bombed, just heinous, terrible, terrible. I want to raise up, while we're going around, one of the things that is also happening, that's happening at least on this side of the problem, is the Veterans and Allies fast that just happened, and the people in New York City and people in DC, and all kinds of actions. I mean, we've had different gatherings. We had what did we call it? No war on Iran gathering. We've so there are activists doing different things, but I want to tell about the 40-day fast. So I don't know how many people completed it, because there were people doing it all over the world and all over the country. There were some 800 people who did some variation that might have been everything, from doing 10-day fasts and having it as a relay or other things. But there were a number of people, and at least two of them in New York City. Russell Brown, our own Russell Brown, who former Western New York Peace Center board member, former chair of the Resist Militarism Task Force, and he is the president of Veterans for Peace, the Buffalo chapter, which is 128, the Western New York chapter. So anyway, he completed 40 days of eating 250 calories a day. So you better believe I did it for 18 days, so I can vouch for how hard that is. Then when I got sick, then I stopped doing it. But he saw it through the whole 9 yards, or the whole 40 days, I should say. And so did another veteran. Ken is from Texas, and he did it as well, those two. And then they had all kinds of people come from Maine especially, and a lot from upstate New York, Grady sisters, two of them anyway, and Catholic workers, all kinds of people came down, and they had a large gathering that was a march from where they've been vigiling outside the UN mission to the U.S. mission to the UN, and then they marched to the Israeli mission to the UN, and then they did a die-in in the street, and 28 of them were arrested. So that's one thing. It's not going to stop. And of course, by the way, to your point, your chronic point, our Stellar Media Award winner, I don't want to mention it too often, or you'll start to get really annoyed. I mean, it's just a small award, but when you talk about the media and so important, how important it is, and about the media blackout for so much of it. So that, when I went to look and find out the details, because I had originally hoped to be there when they did escalate, you can't find it. It's not being reported on. Why is it? Because they don't want to talk about what people are doing, how desperately people are trying to stop this madness in just every way we can. What they did and I want to bring out what they did, Code Pink did in DC. They and JVP, I think it was joint, I might not have all the details right, but they blocked off the cafeteria for the Congress people and the Senate in one of the office buildings, so that they are not getting lunch. Now, I want to say the beauty of that. So people, that's why I said when I was doing that 18 days of that fast, that was tough. When you're hungry, they call it hangry. It just fuels you in a different way, no matter if it's, whether if it's self-imposed or if somebody did it for you. There's nothing like being hungry to really get your attention, and so these Congress people or Senate people who, so when they didn't get lunch for one meal, I'm sure that they were still feeling kind of hangry and hungry and angry, because they're being deprived of food for maybe an hour, maybe not even an hour, because they can turn around and go down the street and get it somewhere else. So I just want to say, call up and thank, just so deeply thank the people who put their bodies on the line, the people who suffered for the people in Palestine. And I want to say that when I was doing that fast for 18 days, when I told people, it got their attention in a different way, because you're really giving something up, putting your body, suffering, literally suffering for other people. So to your thing about personal responsibility, I just want to throw it out. So thank you, those people who have just sacrificed a lot and suffered to try and putting your head in the mouth of the dragon that is the U.S. Criminal justice system. The criminal injustice system is what I like to call it. Very criminal and very unjust, not always wrong, but often wrong in the way they handle things. That is no small matter, even when you're doing it with 28 other people, is that system will just chew you up and spit you out. So anyway, so let us go on into, I like to talk a little bit, maybe this is a good time for you and first to Craig. We lost Imam. I don't know if something might have happened to his phone connection or something. So if he comes back in, we'll be grateful for him to come back in. But in the meanwhile, so Craig, if you want to talk a little bit about the special rapporteur, I think that's what Francesca Albanese is, and speak a little bit about her and her report that just came out, if you would.
Sure. So Francesca Albanese is the special rapporteur of the United Nations on human rights in the Palestinian territory. She has been absolutely brilliant on this mandate. If people don't know, this is an independent mandate. In other words, it's a UN mandate, but she doesn't take any direction from any governments or the Secretariat or anyone else. She is absolutely independent for the length of her mandate, which has just been renewed, despite the efforts of the U.S. government and the Israeli governments and others to try to prevent her from being reappointed. She's been absolutely heroic on this mandate in documenting and writing brilliant reports on the horrors of the genocide, international legal accountability, and so on. And her latest report, released just a couple of days ago, looks at the private sector's responsibility for the genocide in Palestine. Because, of course, you have the government of Israel with its military. You've got complicit governments like the U.S. and others that are a part of the genocide. You've got media companies that are a part of the genocide that play a vital role in the West, covering up on the genocide, disseminating Israeli propaganda for genocide, justifying war crimes, silencing anti-genocide voices, platforming pro-Israel voices, and so on. So they've played a role. But there's another absolutely essential category here, which is the corporations, the private sector entities that have been providing financing and equipment and services for the genocide in Palestine. Companies, international companies that have made themselves complicit in the perpetration of the genocide. And Francesca Albanese's new report talks about some of those companies, which she says are just the tip of the iceberg, but you will be familiar with a lot of these, your listeners will be familiar with a lot of these, and points out that what they're doing is grossly unlawful, not just unethical in what they are doing. Recalling that after the Second World War, private companies were held accountable for their involvement in the genocide of German Jews, European Jews, for example, during the Nazi Holocaust. And she looks at some key industries and actors, arms manufacturers, technology companies that have played a direct role in the perpetration of the genocide, construction firms that have played a direct role, extractive industries, banks and finance companies, pension funds that have invested in the regime and supported it, even universities that have been using their financial power to support Israel's genocide in Palestine. Companies like Hyundai and Caterpillar, Palantir, this tech company that's directly complicit, Amazon and Google and IBM, HP, Microsoft, all of these company names that are everyday names in our own lives, Chevron and others that have been that have been made aware of the crimes that are being perpetrated to which they are contributing, and yet continue to actively support Israel's violations in the occupied territories. And she points out that there are obligations here. First of all, the states in which those companies are registered have legal obligations to stop them from participating in the genocide, from supporting the genocide in this way. That any companies along their supply chains back to their headquarters have a duty to investigate and to punish and to remedy any violations that they find along their supply chain as well. And Francesca Albanese points out that there's a lot that can be done and a lot that must be done. First of all, that those business activities, as a matter of law, are required to cease completely and at once, right? And secondly, that that states and everyone, but states included, have an obligation to sanction, to embargo, to cease any cooperation with any such entities. That there is a requirement of legal enforcement, including individual criminal accountability in some cases, to pierce the corporate veil and hold individual perpetrators accountable. They can't get away with this just because they are private entities. She calls on the International Criminal Court to investigate, by the way, at the international level as well. Of course, BDS, which is the most powerful tool that we all have, directly relevant here. So Francesca Albanese, after a series of reports in which she points out the accountability of the Israeli government, individual Israeli perpetrators, the Israeli military, in which she points out the complicity of other governments and their obligations, is now pointing out the responsibility, obligations of private sector actors, companies from across the world that are actively participating in and profiting from genocide in Palestine.
Yes. So, and that just came out on Monday?
Just a couple of days ago, yeah.
Yousef?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of comment on that from the perspective of like the grassroots organizer, the individual, the person living in this country who is just like watching this all happen and is like, well, what do I do? And through my experiences, I've learned to take all of these things as like calls to action, right? And I think it's really because it's so maddening just to hear all of these things happening and then just internalizing them and not doing something. So for me, it's like I have no choice but to do something. Otherwise, I just hold it internally and it makes me want to crumble, right? So the only thing I can personally do always is to take some kind of action. And I think that that's the intention with reports like this, right? Where it's like, these aren't just coming out for us to just know. It's like, do something about it. Everyone has their role. This person's role was to document and disseminate information about what is happening on the ground, who is, complicit, who is facilitating. And so, I view my role personally as like, okay, well, now I know who the targets are for what we need to be doing with our actions, right? Like that's being laid out in front of us so clearly. It's like, these are the companies that are responsible outside of just these government entities. And like you said, Craig, you referenced like BDS and how this is such a pertinent like scenario for BDS really on, first in an individual level, but also like when we're talking about coming together in collective forms and campaigns and organizations, grassroots or non-profit, whatever it is that you're doing. So for me, I look at all of this as opportunities for individual and group contributions, and this is really a call to action. That's what this report signifies. And just to give like a few examples that came to mind while you were talking, Craig, like when it comes to media, it is absolutely every single individual's responsibility to make sure that you are gaining the truth. You are gaining proper information about what is happening, that your sources are good, that you are engaging with media that is not known to be biased, that is not just disseminating Israeli propaganda. We know what those sources is. We know what that propaganda looks like. It is your responsibility to do your research, very limited research, to know what these biased sources are and find alternative sources which are giving you unbiased, independent information about what is happening on the ground. That is like the minimum thing that anyone can really do, is like make sure you are getting the correct information about what's actually happening on the ground. Do not accept propaganda as your view of what's really happening, right? And then when it comes to the corporations, the businesses that are profiting off of this, BDS has been our biggest tactic forever, especially in the system of capitalism. It's like, what's going to get people's attention? Economic pressure. These corporations are literally nothing without us contributing to them, us buying their products. That's what keeps them afloat. And some of these might be a little harder to BDS than others. Like some of them are set, like, retailers, for example, selling products to individuals. It's like, that is your easiest way to practice your right to BDS, is to stop buying their products. And for some of them, like arms manufacturers, those are a little harder, but honestly, it's not like there haven't been campaigns to pressure them. We've seen so many campaigns around, whether that's shutting down an arms manufacturer, whether that's stopping shipments of military equipment in so many different ways. Like there are so many campaigns out there actively occurring to be a part of, right? So I say, on an individual level, that looks like, where are you spending your money? Are you actively supporting these corporations that are actively profiting off of this genocide? If you are, stop buying those things. Stop putting your money there. And if you want your effect to be magnified, join a campaign where they're trying to get many people to do that simultaneously, because that's really where the largest impact happens, is where you take your individual contribution and you magnify it by collaborating with other people. One person's impact might not seem big, but thousands of people acting in the same way, in unison and collaboration, to practice the right to BDS. Absolutely. So I feel like those are the main things that I'm kind of taking away from this report. This report doesn't exist just to inform you that horrible things are happening. It's to give you information to take action, and give you exactly what you need to know to take action against specific targets that are facilitating this, right? So it's kind of my whole spiel.
So very good and very, very needed. And in fact, I want to bring up Kathy Kelly, another friend of the show, and just a friend, and just a wonderful, actually, she's just activist par excellence, has been in and out of war zones for so many years, incarcerated for civil resistance or civil disobedience, etc. So she and a couple others, including, I'm going to say, she, especially through World Beyond War, where she's the board chair now. But it was also, included Nick Modern and some other friends that got together something called the Merchants of Death Tribunal. So they looked at the merchants of death, or the arms manufacturers, and they had four of them, I think four of the biggest four, or four of the biggest five, and really investigated. They have, if you go to merchantsofdeath.org, you will see there's video after video after video after video giving you back to the information. And so what this also led to was not only people watching the videos, publicizing the videos, which certainly the Western New York Peace Center did, but also going to some of the arms manufacturers to present them with an indictment. So that was done to Boeing and Raytheon and just numerous of them. I know here in Buffalo, we went to Northrop Grumman, who was not on their list, but it was on our list because it's right here. And it was, something it was an unforgettable experience to, of course, the day that we did it, they blocked off their parking area and they wouldn't let anybody into the building. So we wanted to give them this indictment, but we couldn't do it without risking arrest. So we waited, and then we came back like 2 days later and went to the door to give them their indictment. They were very friendly until they realized who we were. They might have realized right away. But anyway, I just want to leave this indictment for you that is telling you about, as you were saying, Craig, the 6 laws, U.S. laws that you're breaking by providing arms and aid to Israel for their war crimes and genocidal acts. And so they said, well, we can't accept anything. They said, and I said, well, we just want you to give it. We want to give it to you so that you can give it to your CEO and your people in the head office. And they said, oh, don't worry. They've already seen that, all of that information on your website. So the good part is they are paying attention. But the bad part is they know, and this is the other part of what you're saying, they know very well they're breaking the law. The U.S. government knows very well that they're allowing these kind of companies to break the law. However, they don't stop them. They don't stop them. So back to selective use of the criminal justice system, selective enforcement of laws. So the laws that the government or the companies want to break, those laws get ignored. So civil resistance is our effort to try and get the government to adhere to the law. So actually, if you would tell us a little bit more about how some of the media companies, could you, Craig, how some of the media companies, because one of the other things when we talk about boycott, well, so boycotting Google or I mean, I do boycott Amazon. I'll tell you, that's one. The only thing I ever ordered from them was a book in Dadi before I went to Afghanistan. I have never ordered from Amazon. But anyway, I mean, but what are these larger companies that aren't weapons manufacturers? What are they doing that is enabling what's going on? I know the surveillance is out of this world for, the people living under the microscope. So is that mostly what it is, or what's, I'm talking about obviously the Palestinians.
Well, Palestine is a testing ground for the technology of repression. It is a testing ground for new weapons. Israel literally tests its oppressive technologies and its weapons on a besieged Palestinian population in the occupied territory, especially in Gaza. And then it advertises to its markets that these are battlefield tested. But the battlefield is civilian bodies, right? This is not wars between two parties, but this is literally the use of new weaponry and new technologies of repression on a captive civilian population. That's what Gaza is for Israel. And then makes billions of dollars in trade for that. At the same time, it has opened its doors to tech companies from abroad to invest as well, purchasing its products and then using those in the genocide itself. This is many things, but one of the things is it is murder for hire. It is actually profiting off all of the atrocities that we have been told about. And Israel has had a high-tech occupation underway in Gaza for decades. Autonomous weapons, surveillance systems, the use of artificial intelligence to target people. Artificial intelligence programs with names like Where's Daddy, which is a targeting program that waits until a target is home with his family so that they can kill the target together with his children and wife and everybody else who is there. The testing of new weaponry, as I've mentioned before, and then marketing those things on the basis that they have been actually used against the populations in Gaza. And the impunity of these companies is extremely dangerous. I mean, these are companies that are big parts of our own lives. Your printer is probably from HP. Your software is probably from Microsoft. You know, all of these companies. You may have, if you have a pension, you may find that your pension is invested in the financing of the Israeli regime and its crimes. So, you know, what this tells me, and your remarks as well, is that, you know, this impunity is there because the governments have decided that they are also benefiting from this, right? So the change is not going to come from governments; it's going to come from people. And you know, you mentioned Kathy Kelly and her colleagues that were engaged in the hunger strike. That's a people's initiative that brings the spotlight to bear. It's happening at the same time as the Gaza People's Tribunal has been established to deliberate on and issue declarations on the crimes that are being perpetrated in Palestine. It's happening at the same time as the Freedom Flotilla, a people's humanitarian aid effort. The People's March to Gaza that was so brutally blocked by the Egyptian government that nevertheless raised a lot of attention. That was a people's initiative. The Samud convoy from Tunisia and Morocco and so on, a people's initiative. All of the acts of civil disobedience, all of the demonstrations, all of the encampments on college campuses, everything that's happening to raise a moral noise is coming from the people and not from the governments. And if you ask me what we need to do, it's more of that. It's more effort in solidarity to declare that we will not allow these things to be normalized. We will not allow the media to be silent about it. We will not allow people to go on about their lives thinking that it's just okay, that a genocide is being perpetrated by our government with our tax dollars in our name, right? That we are the people, that we have moral authority, and that we will take action. We will educate others. We will boycott, divest, sanction. We will carry out civil disobedience when necessary. We will disrupt what needs to be disrupted. We will say no. And you know, if you think it's not making a difference, I think, you know, there is no way that if it weren't for this global movement, that Zoran Mamdani would have been elected in the Democratic primary as the endorsed Democratic candidate for the mayor of New York City against the active opposition and shenanigans of the Israel lobby, of the war lobby, of you know, conservative politicians in this country, of the establishment Democratic Party in this country, and yet the people aren't falling for it anymore, and they overwhelmingly voted for Zoran Mamdani in the New York City primaries. The times are changing. These voices are being heard. It's too slow. It's excruciating slow for the people under the bombs and bullets and tank fire in Gaza and on the West Bank and across the Middle East. It's too slow for the mothers who have to pick up literally the pieces of their children blown to bits, or the children who are shot for fun by Israeli snipers in the head and in the chest. It's too late for them, but it's working, and we have to keep at it. We have to multiply it. We have to be consistent. We have to sustain our activities, find new creative ways to say we dissent, and we're not going to allow this to proceed as it is.
Yousef?
Yeah, I mean, like, just to really mirror echo the things that you're saying, Craig. I mean, like, that's really what I've seen on the ground here is like a lot of, especially over the last few years in the scope of like organizing on the ground, whether in like a grassroots or nonprofit context, has been drawing the connections between what's happening in Palestine and the Middle East, especially the impunity that Israel is being treated with, the lack of accountability that our government is just doing whatever they want, and we have no power over that. And it's really creating what is essentially a movement that has to sustain itself. Otherwise, quite frankly, we die, right? And so a lot of what that looks like is drawing the connections between the environmental movement and drawing connections between the movement in the United States against the militarization of police and the brutality that citizens here in the United States are facing, and drawing those connections to Palestine and realizing that these are connected issues, and joining forces and collaborating to create these like mega campaigns, which are really having these kinds of impacts. When we see, the flotilla that you mentioned, when we see the stopping of shipments of military equipment, like these are joint efforts. These are a lot of people coming together and having this conversation about, okay, we have to do something, and then actually doing it, right? Actually doing the actions. And I agree, it's so slow. Like, I can't even explain how it makes me feel sometimes. However, it's compared to what has been happening for the entirety of the plight of the Palestinians, it's something, rather than the nothing that has been happening for the last century of just watching this unfold. And most people didn't even know it was happening, So for me, it's just like, for how slow it is, and it really, excruciating is the perfect word for it, because that's what it is. It's just like, this needed to happen 100 years ago, and at this point it needed to have actually been like creating these lasting changes. However, this is what we have. This is what we have to work with. It's working. And at some point it will pick up so quickly. I believe, anything social has this multiplicative effect, has this exponential effect where it's slow until it just explodes, because so many people know what's happening. So many people are taking simultaneous action. But it's very unfortunate that, and I know the people that are there, like I really hate that they look at themselves as martyrs, but that's really what they are, as martyrs for the cause that we are building here, an overall global movement towards things like accountability of our governments and challenging the status quo of this capitalist paradigm, which is allowing people to profit off of killing innocent people, especially children, women, men. Like, sorry, I have so many emotions surrounding this, but really that is what it is we are building a movement. This is what it is going forward. Hopefully Mamdani is one of many candidates that comes out of this process, right? Because at the end of the day, what has allowed all of these things to keep happening is these votes by our elected officials to keep sending money and to keep allowing these things to happen. And like, I look forward to the day when that's not a thing. And the only way that's going to happen is to keep this movement building, to keep the efforts that everyone's been actively, boots on the ground, just pushing forward. So I would say now is more important of a time than ever to keep moving forward with everything that's been happening.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. For those of you who are on the radio, you don't see that Craig has some clapping hands going. And I do too, because absolutely. And that, and it certainly will take all of us. So the young energy, the courage of the students, we've had students have been so courageous, and yet the universities have been terrible, shutting them down when they sent 5 different police forces after the people at the encampment, when they just refused. This is UB, refused to let them show what was it called in the camp?
The encampments.
The encampments, right? The encampments, or just terrible repression that's just out of this world. So I just want to give you each a minute, just a quick minute for a bottom line. Craig, what would you say? What do you want people to go out and do? What's some of the things just that you think of as possible actions?
Well, I mean, everybody in whatever corner of the world they live their life has an opportunity to influence others around them. And we are up against this massive wall of propaganda, this massive curtain that's been drawn around the genocide in Palestine. We have for too long, allowed our neighbors to ignore the realities of what was happening. And now that same darkness is infecting our own country in very significant ways. You mentioned the encampments and the crackdown on those, the censorship that's going on university campuses. There are, as I've said before, there are 193 countries in the world. You're allowed to criticize all of them, including your own country of the United States, but you're not allowed to criticize Israel. You have laws being adopted at the state level, at the municipal level, at the federal level, telling us that we have no freedom of expression, no freedom of speech, no freedom of association. We don't have the right to boycott. We don't have the right to condemn a genocide. We don't have the right to call out apartheid. We don't have the right to defend human rights. That's a scary moment in history, and it's happening right alongside this descent into a fascistic approach to governance in this country that has things like ICE on its front edge, not chasing down dangerous criminals, as Donald Trump is fond of saying, but people who are here lawfully, people who have committed no crimes, people who have only dared to speak out against the atrocities being perpetrated in genocide, the genocide being perpetrated in Palestine. So that means that, the longer we allow that darkness to continue unchallenged, the more parts of our own lives it's going to infect. And this is not just standing up for the people of Palestine, this is standing up for all of us. The old sayings about how it's all one struggle and they're all interconnected, that is literally true. It is literally true. That's not just a symbol. And I'm having a mental block now. Aimé Césaire said that that effectively, fascism is colonialism applied at home, right?
Well played.
The colonization of Palestine, all the horrors of the last 80 years that the Palestinian people have been subjected to, the tolerance of that, the impunity of that has now allowed those crimes to be brought home. And, this country knows colonialism. We did it to the indigenous people in this country. We've supported it all around the world. And now ordinary Americans who maybe lived in some privilege previously are feeling the effects. It's time to draw a line.
You're not kidding. You know what? We are really out of time. So, Yousef, I'm so sorry. But I think, it's so great to have this much truth and love being shared on this show. I can't thank you enough, Craig and Yousef and Imam. Imam, thank you so much, Imam Ismail. We are all in this together. We have lots going on. Look at the WNYPeace.org community calendar and join us in so many of these efforts. We're so grateful for both of you coming on. And all I can say is this is Talking Peace. And together we've been talking peace in truth and love. Thank you so much. Thank you so very much. Okay, so I know you have to go. Thank you for making it to the end, Craig. So thank you both so much. Blessings and to be continued. Onward. We're getting there. We're going to get there.
We're going to get